Welcome, everyone. I'm Sue Barber, author, former IT director for a Fortune 500 company, turned executive coach, and this is the Visibility Factor podcast, where we explore how to raise your visibility and play bigger at work and in life. We'll explore key topics and welcome guests that help you shift your thinking about yourself so you can see new possibilities for your leadership. I'm on a mission to create a visibility movement for leaders to show their value and be seen for their true talent. Are you ready to take the next step towards a higher level of visibility for yourself? Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Visibility Factor podcast. This is Sue Barber, your host. I am thrilled today to bring you my guest, who is a global leader, a speaker, and now an author. And she has written an amazing book, and you're going to get to hear all about it. Welcome to the show, Miki Feldman Simon.
Thank you, Susan. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm thrilled to have this conversation because I know we chatted a little bit a couple months ago, and what you're doing is really amazing. So before we get into all the fun stuff, share with everybody a little bit about your background in leadership and what you've done.
Would be delighted to. So I am an ex-executive who's had an interesting career of not just going in the one path. I started my career in HR, spent many years doing that, then held a leadership role in business development and operations. Then I led a marketing department. Then I went back to leading HR companies. And through my leadership roles, companies had multiple successful exits. That means being acquired. And in the last decade or so, I have become an executive coach. And that is the main work I do today, as well as speaking. And I am now, as you said, an author. My book just came out, so I'm getting used to introducing myself as an author as well. And that is actually exciting. And the book, we'll talk about it later, but it really is a combination of my years in leadership and as an executive coach, telling my story and client stories. And just for those listeners that people wonder about my accent. And I've found that some people, if I don't tell them what it is, they're not going to listen to what we're actually talking about. They'll just try and work out what is this unique accent. So I am a combination. I am Israeli, Australian, and I've lived here in the Boston area for 28 years. I know you do not hear that in my accent. You hear mostly the Australian, where I grew up and spent different parts of my life. But the Australians are people who really have fine ears. They know it's not quite a fully Australian accent. So I've lived and worked in all those three places in different parts of my life.
Wow. Talk about a diverse background, diverse experiences, and now a diverse accent on top of it.
Well, I think it was the diverse accent first and then the experiences.
Yes, true. So I'd love to ask you, I think it helps people who are on their own leadership journey. How were those transitions for you? Because I know you had exits, selling companies happened for you. There were different roles and different experiences. How were those transitions for you to go through when it's something very different than what you've done before?
Great question. I think at each one of those transition points, I tried to sit back and to think, first of all, about my strengths. And we have these transferable skills that we can take with us and bring into the different roles that we're doing. Part of my strengths is also I love to learn. I'm curious and I love to learn about new things. I also, at each point in my life, tried to think back of what I enjoyed and didn't enjoy about the different roles where I was. And when we moved to the US, I actually had to take a career break because I didn't have the visa to work here. I didn't know that. That was actually a hard transition where it was just motherhood for a while. I had my second child and it all turned out for the best, but it was hard because it was like the peak of my career. So that was a transition as well. And then I went back and I worked in HR because that was my background. I was coming from another culture. I went to work for a company that was in the telephony field, and I was the head of HR and part of the management team. And I would feel when we were in the management conversations that I would always say they were talking about switches and I would switch off. I had no interest in switches. And I realized that I also felt that my contribution was only so much. I studied psychology and education, and then I have a master's in organizational behavior. But the next company that I went to work for, where I was head of operations and business development, was in the field of education and learning disabilities. My background in psychology and education, when we were sitting in management meetings, I could contribute at all different levels. I was passionate about the field, about what we were doing, and that made that transition a lot easier because I was bringing other skills, and there was the field that was very interesting because often, in marketing, you could do marketing in all different fields, right? And the verticals of the organizations, etc. And from there, I went to head a marketing department in the same educational field. So I knew the field really well. I also knew that I like to experiment and that I'm very good at seeing the customer perspective. What I also knew is that I really didn't know much about digital marketing. So I hired a really good digital marketer. So it goes back to really sitting through and understanding what are your skills, what are your strengths, also what are your weaknesses, and how you don't need to know everything. How can you build a team around you that will enable you to do well? You and, of course, the department, the company, and everything else. So I think that what helped me in the transitions is coming in with an open mind, open to opportunities, and not thinking, I am not X, so I can't do this, but more thinking, what can I bring to the table with the skills that I have? What can be interesting in this opportunity that I can grow, I can contribute, because it's not just about us, right? We want to contribute. We want to make sure that we are successful, that the company that we're working for is successful. And that has helped me in each one of my transitions, being very clear about my strengths. What do I need to either learn? Because we also need to learn different things, or hire the right people around me.
Great advice. I think so many people don't know their strengths, their values, or what they bring to the table that's unique. And I think that is really impressive that you were able to navigate those transitions and recognize where you didn't have the passion for something that you were involved in. And I led network infrastructure for a while, so I understand. I didn't understand all the technology at the nth degree of detail, but I understood it enough to be able to talk about it to leadership. So that was all I needed to do. And then I had my team come in and talk about the rest.
Right.
So I totally agree with you. Yeah.
So, by the way, the part of my book is about this, because it really is in the C. Of course, stands for an acronym, but the C is about clarifying. And part of me sort of bringing all this together was my journey and clarifying. You just mentioned your values, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is really important to me, your priorities at different times. When I took on that job in telephony, my priority was to get back into the workforce after a break, and not necessarily the most interesting. And you know what? I think that even if you asked me, I didn't know at the time how important that was for me, right? So learning from it. And that is all the things like in the C of core, so that you can show up with that intentionality and with that clarity in whatever it is that you're doing in your leadership, in how you live.
I think that was good that you recognized that too for yourself and found something that you loved after that, which is amazing. So
I was just going to say, I think that while I was there at first, I loved it as well. And I loved the engagement and whatever. But after a while, I sort of realized something was missing. And it's good to reflect and to realize that as well.
That's a good thing to know too, because if we're so busy, we're not paying attention to that and doing any reflection. We're just on automatic pilot. I want to talk a little bit about your author journey first before we get into the book. So I read an article about you going to, I think it's Ojai, and you were just in this beautiful place, very inspiring, and you went there to write. And I'm curious if you think back on that moment where you got there and you wrote that article.
How have things transitioned for you just in that journey of being an author?
So I'll start with why I went to Ohio. I decided that I'm going to write this book. And I sat back and I tried to really think, what is it that's going to help me make that happen? And reflecting back on other things that I did in my life, like when I became a coach, I went to, first of all, a week-long intensive. I like to dive in deep, and I need like a big push at first. That helps me, not just taking little steps and then, sort of, for me, it's like dragging it along, right? I like to go straight on. So that's why I went to Ohio, and I tried to imagine, so I live in Boston, and this was February 2 years ago. And I tried to imagine what will inspire me to write. And I had a picture in my mind of a place in nature. I wanted my dogs with me. My husband was flying to Australia, so I knew I had a few weeks that he was away. My kids are grown up. I had a good picture in my mind of what I wanted, and I found it online and went there and really did this brain dump. And at the end of it, I had what you call a really shitty first draft, because I can tell you that by the end of it, I'd written blogs before that were part of it. I knew the framework, and it was just sort of really putting it all together. And that was the beginning of having something that it's like, okay, this really can be a book. So it gave me that confidence, the motivation to keep on going. And at the same time, I had a friend who rented a place in an apartment in Chicago, because that was a stimulating environment for her to write. For me, that's like shoot me in the head to be in just the concrete and the whatever, not inspiring. So I think that something really important is for each person to sit back and think what works for them. So that worked for me. And then what also really helped me is setting deadlines. So that was February, and the November before I was at Thinkers 50. And when I left Thinkers 50, I really said to myself, I want to come back with a book in hand. So I knew I wanted to give myself these 2 years to make this happen. And in some ways I worked backwards from that. And by the end of that year, I had, a much better draft that I sent to beta readers to get their feedback. And there was other feedback of things I had to work through, definitely made the book better. Again, I'm like, okay, there's really something there. And by the way, this process of becoming an author, I remember at that point, it was like, maybe I'm becoming an author. And then when the first copy of the book arrived, and it was a physical result of this process, and you know what this is like, I was even more, I think I'm an author. And I think that when it went live on Amazon, it was on pre-order, I think end of October last year, I went to my husband and I said, I'm an author. And it was just like, and by the way, I never imagined myself writing a book. It wasn't like on my bucket list, but when I figured out the framework, the message of the book, it sort of took a life of its own, where I felt that it could have such positive impact on people that it's like, I got to make this happen. Mm-hmm. So, which was a very interesting process on its own as well. I can tell now I'm owning it. I'm proud. I've had amazing feedback from people, and it feels good.
I love that
accomplishment, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge accomplishment, because so many people start to write and then don't complete. It isn't easy. And I know that everybody listening to this show has heard from a lot of authors, and there are so many who have done such great things. And there are so many who have good ideas, but just can't seem to continue. So kudos to you for setting that big goal and making it happen. And I remember when I opened my first box of books, it was emotional. This, all of this work that has gone into it, that you can't even imagine it coming to that finish line. And then when it does, it's such a great feeling.
Completely. It's like, it's a bit of a baby, it's like I have kids, it's not quite the same, and those babies stay with you in different ways throughout your life, but it is, you work on it for years, and here it's come to life. So it definitely is emotional.
Yeah, we call them book birthdays because we've birthed this little baby out into the world, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
what's interesting for me having two now is like trying not to give one more attention than the other. It's really interesting, right? But during launch, you have to focus on the new baby. So let's jump into the book. I want to like be very formal with the title and everything because we've kind of danced a little bit around what is in the book, but we're going to get into more of a deep dive here. So her
Thank
book is called Core Leadership, a 4-step framework to lead yourself, grow your influence, and amplify your impact. And I love that because it really does help people think about like their leadership journey and where they may have or want a bigger impact than they're having today. Why was it really important to write this book now?
So I think for me in 2022, I got accepted into Marshall Goldsmith's Forefront program that's powered by the 100 coaches. And Marshall kept on asking me, Miki, what is unique about your work? And that was sort of a question that was going through my mind, my work as a coach. And I also became part of Dory Clark's Recognized Expert group.
Mm-hmm.
And there, she kept on asking us, what is your breakthrough idea? And I was just, it's in some ways, it's the same question, but, different perspective on it. I remember I was really like, it was just hassling me. Like, what is it? What is it? And I knew that there was different sort of ideas, frameworks that I used with my clients. But what is it that I did that was different? And I went for a run one day and it just came together and it was like, okay, it is a framework. It is a process. The whole idea of it is self-leadership. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
it's, and when you're asking about my executive background and experience, it's things that I've seen throughout my career and how people get in their own way, how people operate in autopilot instead of being intentional. It wasn't that the idea, it was something that came out of nowhere. It did come from that experience of working with people and seeing how people say one thing, they do another, or people think they show up in one way and they show up in a different way. And also, I think I saw this need where we talk a lot about strategy and the strategies focus on leading other people. And we don't talk enough about leading yourself. And if you don't do a good job of leading yourself, none of the other things are going to happen. I think it's a bit paradoxical as well that we have the most influence on leading ourselves, but it's also the hardest person for us to lead.
Yeah.
And the core framework came in some ways as a solution and a tool for providing that strategy to people. It's a reflective process of helping you work out how you can show up as your best.
And I love that you took that take on it because I think back to when I became a manager for the first time. I kept doing all the things that an individual contributor would do, but I had a manager title because I didn't know how to shift that mindset. So I read Marshall's book about what got you here won't get you there, which
Yeah.
was very transformational for me at the time to start understanding how to get things done through others. And that requires understanding yourself in a bigger way. And that took some time for me because I wish I would have done that before I took the role, but I just, I didn't know. So it's good to do it whenever you figure out you should. But I try to do that with new leaders up front so that they have that foundation to stand on whenever they're in a role, when they get pushed to make a decision or it's uncomfortable. They can really start to trust themselves as a leader and be okay with whatever comes their way.
So I think that you mentioned what got you here, what got you there, and it's
Mm-hmm.
definitely, I think, one of the books that have influenced me as well. Most new managers were great individual contributors, become a manager, not given any tools to do that. And what I also see, this autopilot that I was talking about, is exactly what got you here, won't get you there, because people rely on the old habits, on their old patterns, and sometimes thinking that that's what got them there, not sometimes that they got there in spite spite of
Right.
all those patterns and behaviors.
Sometimes it's what you see around you. So there's a lot of shoulds. I think that because if you don't know enough, you of course look around and what are other people doing? Should I be doing that too? I don't know how to do that. I'll have to figure it out. You're hiding some of the parts of you that are authentic because you're trying to be like someone else. And that took me some time to work through as well. So I wish I would have had your book way back when.
There's
Would have
the
helped me.
shoulds, there's the shoulds and there's the coulds as well. But instead of
Yes.
like, what are you actually going to do, which is the in operationalizing course.
Yeah. All right. Let's dive into each of the 4 parts here.
So core, the acronym, it's an acronym and it really is leading from your core. The idea of it is that when you show up with intention, showing up as the leader that you want to be, you're leading from your core. So core, the C, I mentioned before, clarify. You spend time clarifying your values and the values that you believe in now and use. Because I think, like you also alluded in different parts, there's cultural values, there's your parents' values, your partner's values, but really thinking, what is it that you believe in? So you have this compass that will lead you in the decisions that you're making, your priorities, etc. And the next part is really identifying your priorities, because our priorities change, whether it's because of our family, financial situations, different junctions in life that bring us different priorities. The next is your strengths. We talked about that. What does success mean to you is also an important part of it, because I think we're so influenced by societal and our parents' definitions of success, really trying to think, what does success mean to you? So at the end of it, you have some sort of a mission statement of who you want to be. We talk a lot about what you want to do, career choices, etc., but more like, how do you want to show up? How do you want to live? How do you want to lead? And when you have this definition, that gives you purpose as well. And we have the younger generation that talks a lot about what's your purpose in life. And it seems like in some ways like ambiguous and how do you get there? But when you have your values, your priorities, and you know what's important to you, that gives you that purpose as well. The O is operationalizing it, because we're very good at talking, often not so good at doing. So here you step back and you look at the gaps today. So, okay, if these are my values, will my calendar, will my bank account, will they reflect the same if I look at what I actually do? And looking at your habits to create habits and accountability that will reflect the person that you want to be, your values, your priorities. The R stands for reflect. And here we go inside and really think, how do we get in our own way? Because we all get in our own way, whether it's our triggers, our self-talk, the limiting beliefs that we impose on ourselves, and learning to pause. The pause is such an important part, as in when you pause for a moment, you give yourself that space to see all these obstacles that we put there. And instead of just reacting, you can respond and you can be a lot more intentional. And you can take that second to also think, who do I want to be right now? Because the theory of who do I want to be can be different in what we actually do in the moment. When you take that moment to pause and ask yourself, who do I want to be right now? You can make that shift of showing up more intentionally. The evaluate has 2 aspects to it. One is evaluating your progress. Okay, I set out to do X. How am I actually doing? And the other side of it is we judge ourselves by our intentions, but other people judge us by our behaviors and our impact. So I may think that I'm being direct, but somebody else may think that I'm aggressive. Somebody else may think they're being funny, but other people will think it's inappropriate. So really understanding how you come across to other people. It's like, are you walking the talk? So you can course correct when needed. And that really also builds trust with other people and can really help repair relationships. And by the way, I love that you also have reflect and evaluate as part of your framework. And the idea of it is really giving you the tools in how you are going to show up. And when you do that work, you can come out of that autopilot and really show up with that intentionality, and you become the leader that other people want to follow. So it's not about how I make them follow me. It's how do I behave in a way that they will want to follow me.
Love that. And I love that you included pause. I know Deborah Nash, we know her. Level Up Your Leadership includes a big section on pausing. And I have it too right here. So I love her book. And I think, that is one thing that's not taught, right? Everybody is focused on being busy, not pausing. If I devote time to thinking, being strategic, planning, just slowing down long enough, you can make better decisions. You can also open up innovation and creativity and come up with new ideas. So I love that you're doing that. I think that helps people. If you look at the people that you're working with, and are they using this, or are they using pieces of this in their own experience, and what have they found has been most helpful?
I'll tell you that Reflect had the biggest impact on me. When I understood that in every situation I had a choice in how I respond, it changed my life. I could bring gratitude into situations instead of, I was really good if something upset me, in taking that with me for the rest of the day and thinking that I didn't have a choice. I was upset, and learning that at every moment I had that choice. Seriously, I have become a different person, and it feels amazing. And I also am so much more in charge of my energy that it's empowering. And I see with my clients, it's fascinating. Different people are in different parts of their journey, connect with different parts. And I had a fascinating conversation with one of my clients, and I often I do 360 interviews with the people around the executive that I'm coaching. And while I do that, I do the C work of clarifying the values, the priorities with the client. And the client, when they were talking about their values, the word courageous came up again and again. None of the people that I interviewed described them in that way. And I said to him, where what happened? What's going on with the courageous? And he sat back and he said to me, Miki, that's what I feel like I've lost. And then what is really interesting is when that connection was made, everything in the end of the 360, you have some development goals that you want to work on, everything connected to that, to how do I show up more courageously in doing that. And for him, that was like a switch, a turning point, a transformation. For others, I've seen the going back to the values, like understanding that, hold on, these are my values, but I'm really not behaving according to all of them. Maybe, I'm working on the ambitious and that, but I'm not being respectful to other people. And the reflect is huge. People understanding the limiting beliefs that they have imposed on themselves. And I think that with all of that, learning to say no and make decisions becomes a lot easier, because when you know your values, when you know your priorities, and somebody asks you for something, and this is especially for, often I've seen with women and with people who tend to be more pleasers, but to sit back and suddenly take that pause and say, hold on, does it fit with my priorities? I had a client that was so good at saying yes to everything that she was brilliant, but it started hurting her performance. And when she could go back and see that, hold on, also she had this limiting belief that to be a collaborator and to work with people, you had to say yes to everything. Learning to say no, but it became so much easier when it wasn't just like, well, people tell me I need to say no more often. It came from her. And she understood the impact that it could have, and that when you say yes to something, you're really saying no to something else. But having the clear priorities and motivation to do that, it just gives the momentum to change. It's just like 10 times, 100 times more power, because it gives that intrinsic motivation to do the things that they want to do that fit with their leadership journey.
I think it re-energizes them, right? Because they have a little bit of a roadmap or a plan or a big goal to go after. I love the whole model because it's just really, of course, easy to remember. It just all comes together so nicely. So I'm so happy that you took the advice of Dory and Marshall and moved forward to figure that out for yourself, because I think it also gives you a place to really lean into even more now, your leadership conversations and coaching and speaking. And so that's an amazing thing for you. Is there anything else you want to share about the book?
The book, I share stories from my coaching clients, of course, modified details so that
Yes.
you can't identify. And I also share a lot of my personal stories and my personal journey. And I'll share a couple if you don't mind. So one, when I turned 50, and that was 7 years ago, I looked back and tried to think of where was I living according to my values and where I was not. And it was clear that there was room for improvement when it came to my fitness. Thinking on how to operationalize that, I decided to set myself a big goal. Do you remember? I like to throw myself into big things.
Yeah.
And I decided to go climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And
Wow. Okay.
I literally set myself a high goal, and I I started walking. It got me exercising, which was the goal. My husband came with me. He was like, if that's what you want to do, okay. My son, my son is 31 now. He's an avalanche forecaster, very, very active guy. He was like, yeah, let's go. My daughter, I think, she was a senior in high school then, and she said, okay, no, thank you. So it was the three of us, and it was extremely difficult. Okay, it's an 8-day trek, and I think by the third day, my muscles were like, oh my God. And on the 6th day, you trek to what's called base camp. And you have a bit of a rest in the afternoon. And then at about 11 o'clock at night, you start trekking up the mountain. It's dark. It is freezing cold. Even Boston standards, I was wearing, I think, 7 layers on top and 5 on the bottom, something like that. Okay. Like 2 down jackets, no pants. It was extremely challenging. And throughout the way up, I was using the tools of core, monitoring my self-talk constantly, what is useful, what is not useful, and also leaning into my strength. One of my biggest strengths is determination. We got up to the top of the mountain at 8 in the morning. So this is after starting at 11 o'clock at night. And then you need to get down. And after getting down, you still need to continue to base camp. It's a trek. At the end of it, my husband said to me, we've been married now for 30-something years. And he said, Miki, I have new admiration for you, determination. When I reflected back, I realized that this is while turning 50, I needed to prove to myself that I can do big things. And that in some ways also gave me that strength and belief that I could write this book, because I climbed Kilimanjaro. I set myself a big goal. I did it. Yeah, I'm setting myself another big goal, and I can do this. And I hope that for other people, it will also help to want to think of, okay, you set yourself a goal and you do something. What do you learn from it? What are you taking from it to the next thing that you're doing? Because we tend to just sort of chase and be on that autopilot that you described before, chase the next goal instead of like, okay, enjoy it, learn from it. And what are you really taking and what has it really given you? That empowers you in whatever it is that you do next in life. And I'll give you another quick example of Paul. That's what I called him in the book. A successful executive who was exceeding expectations in meeting results every time, but his team was leaving. People didn't like to work for him. Why? He was never listening. He was never present. He would shut ideas down. And when we sat down and we did first of all, the values work, and he wrote down his values, he was very proud of, he was very ambitious, and he liked respectfulness and collaboration and all those things. And then when we looked at the feedback, he sat back and we looked at what would be operationalizing each one of those values. And suddenly it was like, I'm living by one of my values. I'm not living by these other values. And this is the impact that we're seeing. What would it look like? How do you try? And the transformation takes time. And I think it's really important for us to understand we need to try and make small changes, work on different things. We can't change everything at once. It's atomic habits like the 1%, right?
Right.
1% and 1%, they really add up. And it's a process. But when you stick with it and you put in the work, you can create the change and you can become the person that you want to be. And I think I'll say one last thing here, Susan, that what was really important to me and what I really encourage people is to pause, zoom out, first of all, for the clarify, so that you become the person that you want to be. Because when we don't put in that work, we become somebody. We get pulled by other people's priorities and things. And then sometimes there's that moment of real regret that we've maybe succeeded. Was it under our terms? Was that what we really wanted?
I love that you're talking about stories like this because everybody has the opportunity to make choices for themselves. And if you take nothing else from this, I hope that you hear in what she has just shared, make choices that really serve you, that make you happy, that bring you what you want in your career. Because you can start that today. You don't have to wait.
Exactly. And and it's a balance because we were talking before about being open to opportunities. On the one hand, it's being open to opportunities. And then you mentioned like your manager, they have their own priorities. They don't necessarily, there's some amazing managers that their priorities align and it's what's best for you. But more often it's what works best for what they want to achieve and being very aware of that. And by the way, women actually tend to think that their managers see the work that they're doing and that they're going to promote them and do what's best for them. They tend to take more ownership on that. And this is where we need to learn from the men and do better ourselves.
Yes, that was also something I had to learn the hard way. Thank goodness I was able to learn that. And now I can share it in the book because that is something I didn't make visible. I didn't talk about what I wanted next.
Mm-hmm.
So making those things visible is really important. So, oh my gosh, I think we could go for at least 3 more hours if we just kept going. So I'd love to have you share where people can reach out to you, learn more about the book, what you're doing, more about your coaching.
Thank you, first of all. And it has been a lovely conversation. And I feel like just about everything that you say is sparking something else for me to say, to think about. So lovely talking with you, Susan. People can find me on LinkedIn and on my website, Miki Feldman Simon. It's Miki, M-I-K-I. Also, Core Leadership Book is .com. People can find me there. And I would love to connect with people. Feel free to reach out with questions. You can learn more about my my coaching, my speaking. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, we can't leave out the speaking part. That's a big piece too, right? Oh, I love it. Okay, so we're going to dive into the last 4 questions that I ask every guest. And I'm really excited to hear your answers. And I might have a follow-up question in one of those. So what do you feel visibility is for you, and why did you answer that way?
So you'll hear it in my answer. So visibility, I see it as showing up with intention, as the person you want to be, and consistently. That clarifies the intention. The consistently is both like thinking of the habits and putting in that work in who do I want to be right now. Because it's not easy, but that's how we show up is how people are going to see us. Yeah. So putting in the work to show up as who you want to be consistently.
And what are you doing to be visible?
I think the book has been part of it, but it's definitely going through the core framework myself. So whether it's clarifying what is it that I stand for, and rethinking success, by the way, at some point where points for me, success was more maybe about financial impact. And as the idea and the book and the coaching came, it really was about more making positive impact on other people. The consistent action, by the way, for being visible, it started also with writing a blog and then writing a weekly blog consistently. And I have to say, last year was the first year that I did that. So before, there were points where it's like, that's what I wanted, and it didn't happen one week. And then it was easy to say, well, I'll see it won't happen another week. But doing that work consistently, and again, pausing and thinking how I want to show up and how I do it in a way that also lands well for other people. And that's the evaluate as well, getting feedback from people to grow and to learn from, and continue showing up as that person.
Love it. Well, you're absolutely living the core framework for sure. What is some leadership or career advice you've received along the way that was most helpful for you?
I mentioned this before, but definitely that I always have a choice. It seriously changed my relationships at home, my relationships at work. It made me so much of a happier person because can I tell you a little story?
Sure.
So last week, the day that my book launched, I spilled coffee on my computer. Exactly. Oh no, I stayed calm. I was grateful that it happened after I sent out all the emails that needed to go up to the launch team. I was grateful that it didn't happen the next day where I had my virtual launch. My computer was dripping coffee. I went to the Apple shop. I was grateful that it's closed. And I was kind to the people there, even the ones that were not helpful. I spent a few good hours there. And I saw in myself, I saw the change. And after seriously years of work, Susan, on seeing what to be grateful for, and I was looking at myself and I was like, wow, this was coming to me automatically. It wasn't like at first it was a pause. Okay, Miki, what can you be grateful for now? Okay, who do you want to be right now? But where it was just like seeing that change, that has been the impact of that leadership tip and putting in the work of years. And it's still, because there can be a trigger that sometimes that I still need to pause and take that deep breath and ask myself, who do I want to be right now? I can choose who that will be and how I will show up.
Yes. I have been through that exact experience myself, and it is really interesting to reflect and watch yourself go through these moments where in the past you might have had a whole different reaction for yourself or for others. And I prefer the neutral place of being calm and composed for the most part, as much as I can, right? Okay, last question. What is a book you would recommend to the audience?
So I recently reread Adam Grant's book, Think Again. And I mentioned it in the book, but I think it's just so incredibly timely because our society at the moment is so divided. And in the book, he really talks about how part of leadership is rethinking your ideas. And I think that so many people today form opinions based a lot of maybe a TikTok and lots of lack of knowledge, and stick with them, sometimes for no reason at all, and not being open to having a real discussion with other people where you're curious and listening and open to learn and opening to change your mind. I love Adam Grant's work in general, but I think that that book is just so timely. And I also strongly believe that changing your mind is a good thing. And a lot of people see it as, oh my God, if I change my mind, how are people going to see me as a leader and whatever? It's something to respect.
Yes. I got to see him speak in person way back when, before I don't even remember what book he was doing. Maybe what was one of his first books? I can't remember, but my coach had invited me and I didn't really know that much about him, but he was wonderful. I just have one bonus question for you, because I think you have been very smart at putting yourself in the room with a lot of influential people, especially since becoming a coach and getting involved in some things. What has that been like for you? How do you feel like that's helped you? Because a lot of people struggle with, from a networking standpoint, doing that. It feels uncomfortable, especially if they think those people are ahead of them in their career.
What a good question, Susan. That's a process as well. I can tell you that at times I've done that better, and at times not. And it's interesting. I remember always telling my children that people are humans. It doesn't matter who they are. Like if it was the principal and anybody else. And, throughout my career, and I was quite young when I was in leadership roles and was, around CEOs, etc. But I remember being part of the Marshall Goldsmith's 100 coaches, and in the beginning, showing up and like feeling, well, I'm not them, and being very aware of my self-talk has been one thing. I think after that first interaction, when I went back and I reflect on what could I have done better, what was going on, and I talk about this in the book. I grew up in a very chauvinistic household, and my father told me, you're not going to get a degree. My brother was going to become a lawyer or a doctor. I was a very good student. There was no reason for any one of these things. Having that input for the 18 years that I lived at home, I thought I let go, but I still had a limiting belief that I could be good, I could succeed, but I put a glass ceiling for myself, and I had to understand that I can also be one of the best, and like at the top of the top. And so understanding again how I got in my own way. And then I'm going to tell you of completely on the other side of it. So when I went to Thinkers 50 now in November, and I went with book in hand, I had no problem showing up and talking to, I gave a book to Stuart Cranier, who's one of the founders of Thinkers 50, and talked with him because it wasn't about me. It was about the message of the book and about the impact that it can have. And I think when we think about the value that we bring, and that is in so many different things, right? And how we can help people, and we make it more about that, it is so much easier to show up, talk with different people, approach them, and show up in as our best. And it seriously gave me the guts to believing in this message and in what I'm doing, to reach out to Marshall Goldsmith. He wrote the foreword for my book. I have amazing endorsements from all different people. I interviewed Carol Kaufman, Chester Elton, Dory Clark for my book, because it wasn't about me. It was believing in the work that I'm doing and in the message that really empowered me. And when I talked about the clarifying of my values, of my strengths, when you have all of that and you know what you're bringing to the table to different interactions, that gives you a lot of strength as well. And I'll add one more thing, stop with the comparison. Because when we compare, and we're comparing, and especially today, you're comparing often to the Instagram version, and there's so much going on. Let go of that. When you have that internal strength of what you believe in, what you bring, what you can do, you can show up as your best. And it's work. It's work of reminding yourself of those things before you go, before you interact, so that you can show up as your best.
Wow. Well, I'm so glad I asked that, because I feel like that was exactly what I think people need to hear. There's just a lot of internal self-talk that isn't helping them grow and develop in the best way, and keeps them small because of old situations they may have encountered when they were younger. So love that you shared that. Thank you for that. Thank you for being here. Thanks for writing the book. I'm excited to share it with clients of my own. And I think it's really going to change how people look at themselves, because it's not something that they inherently think about is their own self-leadership. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Susan, so much. What a wonderful conversation.
Yay.
And thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Of course. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining today on the Visibility Factor podcast, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks so much for listening to the Visibility Factor podcast. Remember that visibility starts with small steps that are intentional and consistent each day. Be bold, be visible, be the leader you were meant to be. Find us and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Follow us on all of our social media platforms, which are highlighted in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Visibility Factor podcast.